live. And there we go. It looks like we're live. Thank you everyone for joining us for this last installment of the Super Hangouts. We've got the DevOps gurus and our that was supposed to be you guys. You're supposed to,
Well, they saved the best for last.
That's right. We've got Garth here, we've got Shawn Powers, and we've got Ben Finkel. All are going to be talking about DevOps and what it means to the IT administrators. Let's go ahead and start with Ben. We just came off of the Microsoft Super Hangout. We're hearing all the wonderful things that are coming up through Microsoft. I know that you've been doing a lot of work on the Azure side.
Yep.
Did I say that right? Azure?
Very good.
Azure. Where is the systems admin headed now?
They're headed to the cloud. I mean, you hit it right on the head. The whole system administration features that everyone's excited about are just moving into the cloud because it's so much cheaper and so much easier to do on something like Azure. When you roll up your systems in the cloud, you can spin up systems, you can spin up test systems, you can configure them, you can run them, you can run A/B tests, and you can do all that in a virtualized environment. And you can do it so fast with a script that you're backing away from the hassle of dealing with your own dedicated server environment.
Mm-hmm.
So by moving to a public cloud system like Microsoft Azure, which is a big part of what's happening just all over the IT industry today, you're ensuring that you're able to maintain sort of the agility and the nimbleness that you need to keep up with business. So it's really a big part of what's going on. I think it's really an interesting thing that's happening.
Awesome. You touched on one thing that comes up quite often. Do you think the days of the huge server farm are done?
Well, no, because those clouds still have to run on a huge server farm. So at the end of the day, you're still going to have the big server farms. I think they're consolidating. I think you're going to find them very, very rapidly kind of consolidating into a few primary providers. And there's always still going to be, people running their own data centers for whatever reason, security purposes, personal control reasons, whatever they find. But for the most part, I think those data centers are going to really consolidate among a number of companies that are providing it. Things like Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Azure or Amazon. I forgot Amazon Web Services. They're a big one. So yeah, they can't go away. We still need them, but they're not going to be in everybody's business anymore.
Okay, let me build a scenario for you. Let's say you've got a systems admin. He's been training since NT4. He's got everything current up to 2012, and he's just terrified of Azure. What advice do you give to that person? Because he knows he's got to pick up that cert. He's got to go that direction because that's where everybody's going. Mm-hmm. What advice do you give to him? Where does he start? How does he get into it?
Well, I think that the easiest thing to do is to go to the website and follow along with the tutorials and the learning paths. Microsoft actually has great learning paths for moving to Microsoft Azure, and play around with it. Again, because it's all software defined, because it's all virtualized, it's very, very easy to spin these things up and try it out and see how it works. And I think that initial, what feels like dipping your toe in the water, which is very, very easy to do, is really going to remove a lot of that anxiety that they might be feeling about it, because they're going to see how easy it is. They're going to see how much control they still have. Mm-hmm. They're not relinquishing all the control and all their expertise to someone else, but they're going to be able to see how they can get all of the advantages and all the extra power out of it.
Plus, this administrator endured NT4.
Yeah.
Going to Azure is going to be like going to the spa.
That's a great point. I mean, it is so easy and so simple to do, and it's a blast. It's awesome.
Yeah. Great. Let's talk about the person on the flip side of that coin. Brand new, coming into IT, they have a dream of becoming a systems admin. How soon do they get into cloud? Which direction do they go?
They get in right away. That ought to be your entry point into the business at this point. Unless you have some specific reason to not be looking at the cloud, that is your focus, that is your goal, and that's where you need to be looking. Which way do they go? Which way does their heart tell them to go? I mean, there's the three big providers that we always talk about are AWS, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. And those are obviously, controlling a big piece of the market share. VMware, they're a big part of this. IBM, Rackspace, and there's a lot of companies out there. They gotta be steered by what looks interesting to them, what potential job opportunities they might be looking at. If they're already inside of an organization, where that organization wants to go to the cloud. So that's a tougher question to answer, I think.
Yeah. But for a lot of people in the community, you know, we're faced with all the new technologies. We've got our bosses breathing down our necks, and then we're in CBT Nuggets. We see all the different offerings, all the different courses. And so to us, it's kind of confusing, you know, especially if you're a sysadmin and you've been working for several years. The cloud just, it seems, you know, it's that thing that we've been waiting for many years, but we're still afraid of it. You know, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to get rid of our whole team? Are we going to a one-man show now because everything's going to be on the cloud? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's the wrong way to look at the cloud. I think the cloud is about separating out responsibility. Let's say this team that you're talking about works for someone in the healthcare industry, for instance. Maybe they make pharmaceuticals. Does a company whose expertise is making pharmaceuticals, do they want to own expertise in putting servers in racks and maintaining climate controls and ensuring that they have clean power supply coming in? That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no real reason for them. If their core business is producing pharmaceuticals, there's no reason for them to be looking down these very different sort of skill sets and having to manage and maintain those skill sets, hire for those skill sets, and own that. So what they need to start looking at is that infrastructure becoming someone else's problem, and they're simply going to use it as a resource, the way that they probably use a lot of software already online. You know, a great example I think is HR software. Most people are using HR software that's hosted elsewhere. This is the same kind of thing. You're letting someone else take over the complexity of this, so that you can focus on what you do and you can manage it and you can maintain it, but you're not having to plug wires into the back of computers.
It's giving them more time and making them more agile. They can focus on other things. I think that's one of the big draws to the cloud. It's not making us irrelevant or administrators irrelevant. It's making them more efficient.
You know, and that's the scary part of it, because we see so many things that are going to be automated. Everything is integrating with everything else. It used to be that you could find a job, sit down in your little silo and never leave for another 15 years. Now that is slowly going away.
That's kind of funny you say that, because Shawn just automated himself out of
Well, you know, I think the cloud, it's scary. Computing is really becoming a commodity. You know, I mean, it's no longer an investment a company has to make in a data center. It's just a commodity that they purchase, like electricity or, you know, anything like that. And you can see it as scary for, you know, the person coming in. Oh, I'm not going to be able to sit down and manage the cloud anyway. Or the company doesn't have to make this huge investment in a data center, so maybe they can now invest in people to take advantage of, you know, the compute cycles that are now just a commodity. So I think it's easy to get scared of what these changes mean, but it could be positive for the, you know, for the administrator, because now, you know, there's not that big risk of investing in this huge infrastructure. You can do cloud-based computing very small, you know, and you can take more risks because the risks are far smaller, you know, hits to the pocket if it goes wrong. So I think that, yes, it's new technology to learn, but a lot of the stuff in the cloud is going to be the same whether you're using somebody else's servers or your own servers. So I think, you know, you're talking about just, you know, do you learn cloud computing or traditional? The overlap there is huge. Most of what you're going to do on your own servers is the same thing you're going to be doing on cloud servers. And in fact, now there's even, you know, lots of hybrid clouds where part of the cloud is in your data center and part of the cloud is, you know, somewhere else. So I think that there's a paradigm shift, but it's not changing, you know, employability or the need for workers. I don't think it just makes more opportunities to do more.
And it's not an all or nothing proposition either. You know, you don't have to put everything in the cloud today, tomorrow. You can gradually go over there, move small, non-risk or, you know, less risky projects up there to test the waters and learn what your provider is all about before you make a big decision. Awesome. And hybrid cloud is a big thing that people are talking about these days, because in hybrid, from a sense that you know, some stuff on premise, some stuff off premise, or
you don't want out
multiple
there.
clouds. Features, utilizing the best features of clouds that you need for your project. So.
Absolutely. What advice do you give to the system admin who is looking to be well-rounded, so they can improve their marketability and they can go for the bigger paying jobs? How do they pull in? And I just realized Jeremy Chara should have been sitting here to represent the AWS. I am so sorry about that. You see,
Come on over, Jeremy.
All right.
Come on.
And now the viewership is going like
Finally, some class in this joint.
So we just went from 10 viewers to like 1,000.
That's right. We scaled up in the cloud.
Rockstar man.
There you go.
Neo himself is here.
So, Jeremy, one of the big topics for systems admins is there's so many different cloud offerings. People are confused, they're scared, don't know which way to go. Everybody wants to increase their skills, they want to broaden their knowledge, but one company says, oh, hey, we got to have AWS, or we got to have GCP, or we're a Microsoft shop, so we're going to Azure. What advice do you have for systems admins who are faced with, okay, let's choose what direction to go, which is the smartest choice?
The world needs somebody who can put it all together. Meaning, you have to look at the situation and be able to find all the solutions that fit together to build that certain thing. There are many people who know how to do servers. There are many people who know how to build a network. There are many people who can go into AWS and set up an EC2 instance and host a website or something like that. But there's very few that actually can put it all together. So the name of the game is know a little about a lot, which is very different than the name of the game of yesteryear. And the reason I say that is because we're walking into a world of commodity, meaning you used to really have to know how to build a server, but nowadays you click a button and poof, there's Windows running instantly exactly where you need it to get to the next step. You used to know how to set up a data center, but now you have these features like AWS and Amazon, or is there any other? Like AWS or Amazon or EC2. I mean, that essentially takes a lot of the knowledge from yesteryear and automates all of it to where now it's, can you put the puzzle pieces together? So that's if you're looking to, and then find what you really are good at and specialize in that, but know the big picture, know how to.
That's key too, because I can know how to do this and I can know how to do that and how to do this. The real value is knowing which one I should do, which is the wise, what's the best solution. And
so it's a jack of all trades era right now.
Yeah, it kind of is.
At least knowing enough to be able to make that decision.
And I would say for a lot of people that have this proclivity, get into development. Because that's gonna I take a knife and go because that would be the most terrible thing in my life. But that's honestly, thank you, buddy. That's honestly, that's kind of where
it's funny that you mentioned that. I was just last weekend with my brother, and he was asking a little bit about DevOps, and I was explaining Chef to him, which is another thing we should be talking about. And he goes, and he kind of scrunched his face. He goes, "That sounds a lot like development." I said, "Well, what do you think the Dev in DevOps stands for?"
Devo.
Yeah. And let's go ahead and chase that rabbit down the hole. Let's talk more about Chef. It looks like that's something that
just configuration management in general, right?
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. I did a Chef course, I did a Puppet course, and they're two different solutions to the similar problem. It's configuration management. I think that, and Ansible, when we were talking about before we started the video, it's another configuration.
C and PowerShell is actually configuration.
Okay, and so it's awesome to be able to understand those different technologies to see what one makes the most sense. And sometimes it's just whichever one you like better. I'm not going to say I have a choice one over the other right now because every situation is different. I forgot the question that you asked me originally. So
we wanted to know more about Chef.
Okay, just what it does. I mean, its purpose. Oh, it's if you can configure a server, and I mean, if you're a system administrator, you should be able to configure a server and set up a server to do what you want it to do. Traditionally, a system administrator would have to do that, and then you'd have to do it again, and then you'd have to do it again. And when I was in system administration for 20 years, and so I would write my own little scripts to do some of the things automatically for me. The DevOps configuration management, like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, they've kind of taken the concept of, hey, if you do it once And why don't you have a computer do it over and over and over again? And done a much better job than, we used to hack together bash scripts to do this. But now using programming tools and development language, you can actually program your computers to do the work for you. And again, the fear is, oh my goodness, now I'm going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
We don't need a system administrator anymore.
If you can automate everything, what do you need?
Yeah, and I really, really like to look at it from the other side. I no longer have to set up Apache on 13 servers tomorrow. What could I do in our IT infrastructure to make it better? And even if it's learning, maybe tomorrow I can actually learn what Chef is, so that I think that it gives us more opportunities to be better at what we do, rather than get mired down in things that we can have a computer do for us. I really think that it's just going to be able to it's going to allow us to increase our effectiveness in IT across the board, because we're going to be able to concentrate on things that historically would just take so much time and drudgery. I mean, I don't know how many times the people in this room have clicked next, but I mean, if we could have that time back, how awesome would it be?
Yeah, absolutely. Now the big thing is integrating. So we have these really mixed up cloud scenarios. We've got a hybrid this, and we've got a private here, and then that's out on public. A systems admin is kind of faced with all kinds of challenges. We know that, but the biggest part of that challenge is getting the data from this server up to the cloud effectively. We don't want to lose anything, and then we need to secure it. How hard is it for systems admins to learn how to do that now? Is this a point and click situation, or do we need to get in there and learn some programming languages? Do we need to take a Cisco security course? What do we need to do to be ready to move our company's data up to the cloud?
I talked a lot, so I'm just going to say one thing and let somebody else talk. If there's one thing that I've regretted in my IT history, it's that I never really learned to be a developer, because I think that's really going to be so beneficial in the future for any person in IT. And so,
yeah, a lot of the clouds have models for all your migration paths out there. So, and there's you can go hardcore and automate some sort of solution to move your data dynamically and keep moving it, especially if you're in a hybrid scenario where you need to put it back and forth, or there's lift and shift models where you just pop it in and you're done. So
what makes sense in here?
Yeah.
There's a total theme. It's all about automation, commoditizing. I mean, in everything. And I represent the network side, server side, development side, but all of it's about automation and putting these puzzle pieces together. You made me think of something as you're talking. I bought a. Have you guys ever heard of a Synology?
I had one.
Yeah. All right. Synology.
Yes,
Synology. So. Yeah. I'm sorry, you're out. So this little box, I get it, $200 some off of Amazon. I set it up. It does an iTunes server. Click, click, click. Done. It does a cloud replication. When you talked about getting your data off-site, I put my photo collection and it automatically replicates that off to Google Drive or AWS or wherever you want to store that information. And I'm sitting here looking at this little box, this little $200. It's really Linux at its underpinning, but with a pretty GUI over it. And I go, this little box does everything that our servers of yesteryear, talk about NT4, our servers of yesteryear, 2000, 2003, all in this little $200 box, click, 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 done. And that's what we're seeing is that same thing is happening to the enterprise, to where it's now commoditized, it's now automated. The biggest fear, and I talked to Anthony, we should bring Anthony into this too. Right, all right. So I was talking to Simona. We're talking about software-defined networking, right? There we go. Thank you, Anthony. Right. The biggest topic, and it was the first question when you and I sat down for the webinar earlier. Tell me about SDN, software-defined networking. Mm-hmm. I'm scared is what it's saying, because that changes the whole face of networking. And Anthony and I were talking earlier, this is probably 5-10 years out, but it is a complete automation of network as a whole, to where switches, routers, firewalls, everything are now controlled by a central Borg-like brain, to where you click a button and deploy your network, rather than I have to configure this switch in this WAP in this on all these different things. So the name of the game, I mean, trainers unite and say, automation, commoditization, and now, I mean, we're all looking at Ben. We're all like, I wish I would have been a developer, and we're like, Ben, show us the light. That's going to be
it's really
the
true.
glue that ties it all together.
I think a great quote I read about DevOps once said that DevOps is not automating your systems, it's automating the automation of your systems. And I think that's really critical. And tools like Chef and Puppet and Ansible are the critical core tools that are going to let you do that, because they take away this question, even the question about that you just raised about how do you move your data up into the cloud. You're going to stop thinking about where your data is, and you're just going to start thinking about, oh, I need some space for data. Like, and and that's what your job ought to be. You ought to be like, I need some space for data. We saw this with Google when they were showing off their container engine, some of the new features in Google's container engine, and the way it allowed you to provision space in the cloud without having to define where that space was or anything else. You just kind of threw a line up and said, oh, by the way, I need 20 gigabytes, and then there's 20 gigabytes available to your containers. So it's not going to be, in the near future, it's not going to be so much of a, are we here or are we there? It's going to just be the system that you have available to you, and software is going to figure out where stuff is.
Okay, so let's talk about systems admin right now working. The boss says, okay, let's start thinking about moving up to the cloud. We know that we're going to be automating a lot of stuff. What about integrating it? Are we just going to go? Are we just going to be looking at? Well, this is kind of a loaded question, but are we just going to be looking at half of our server farm is now going to be on VMware, and then the other half of it's going to be out on GCP or AWS or Azure?
Well, a lot of these vendors, Cisco's one of them, they're manufacturing tools right now and products that are multi-vendor. So your workload is initially VM, and then you want to migrate over to AWS. It will literally take your workload and move it from one platform to the next. So all these vendors are addressing integration.
Yeah. And Stackdriver?
PowerShell's a big part of that.
Oh
too.
yeah, PowerShell.
Every company has PowerShell module containing commands to everything. And even Google wrapped it into their Google Cloud Platform. Their tools and now have PowerShell commands.
Part of the answer is attrition too. I mean, as your infrastructure wears out, don't buy new infrastructure. You then buy the commodity, and you replace your dying infrastructure with something that you don't have to replace.
Absolutely. Jeremy has brought it up several times. How much development do we need to know as systems admins now, and moving forward? How much do we need to get into it? Do we need to learn everything there is to know about Python? Do we need to learn?
No. But I did buy like Python for Dummies and read that on the plane on the way here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I have an appreciation of what's going on there.
And a lot of these clouds today too. I mean, you can do things through configuration files.
Mhm.
You know, they're what's the word? Declarative syntax.
Yeah.
So you don't need to know how to program. You need to know how to set properties in a configuration file.
It is really the lines are blurring, because I'm
They
not
are
a developer, but the Chef and Puppet courses, I mean, it's Ruby code that I'm writing. Don't tell me that it's a Ruby code. It's just configuration files that have to be organized in this fashion. So it is
Writes
funny.
the code for you, which is the next step.
You mentioned it earlier. I mean, sysadmins have always been doing things like writing bash scripts. I mean, writing scripts has always been a part of their job. I think it's more the trappings of programming that are coming into it. So when you're writing your configuration, your PowerShell or your Chef or whatever it is you're writing, you're gonna check that into source code control. You're gonna run unit tests against it. All these things that only programmers used to do, now you're having done against your scripts. These kind of extraneous
Machine
things.
learning is coming out. Machines are going to code themselves.
That's right.
The Matrix is here.
It's all Terminator, right? That's 2 years from now. We're all done.
Yeah, absolutely. There have been a bunch of questions about Linux. Where do people start, and how is it going to help the systems admin? How's it going to help the network admin? How's it going to help the help desk guy who's trying to move up and move into one of these admin roles? Where do you start in Linux? You've got LPIC, you've got Real World,
So I'll say first, and I probably have to turn in my Linux card. It's not the end-all solution to every problem, but it's so integrated into things like the cloud that having a familiarity with Linux, and even if that familiarity is just so you're no longer afraid of it, It's going to make your ability to leverage Linux, even if you never log into a terminal shell, not being afraid of leveraging Linux from the cloud or in your environment I think it's going to be crucial just because it's so commonplace and it's so useful. I mean, from a cost factor, from a resource factor, it's very efficient. There's a lot of good reasons to use Linux. And if you're familiar enough with it, you can make those decisions where it makes sense, where it doesn't make sense. We were talking yesterday, a lot of times Linux folks are zealots, like Linux is the only answer to every problem, and if you say, oh, I need to, my company uses Active Directory, and you talk to a Linux zealot and they say, well, you should replace that with OpenLDAP. You don't need Active Directory, but that's not true. Active Directory is so much more powerful and does so much more. So I think having enough knowledge to be able to say statements like, well, that's just the dumbest thing ever. You can't replace your entire, Active Directory thing with OpenLDAP. If you didn't know Linux and you didn't know limitations and you just thought it was this magical thing that solved all the problems, that's not useful to a company. So learn. It's almost like we're a learning company.
You would think we have trainers and stuff.
For Cisco, did you notice what the viral platform runs on? It's Ubuntu. I called Shawn. What do I do? Just take my course. Is that LPIC 1? That's the starting point in our
well, actually, LPIC 1, it was the first level of Linux certification.
Yes.
But the learning curve's a little steep at first. If you've never used Linux and you start with LPIC 1, you're like, I can't do this. This is beyond me. So the Linux Professional Institute came up with Linux Essentials, which is.
And did you do that for CBT?
Yeah,
Great.
It's out there, and it is a certification. But even more than that, it's a great ramp to get you up to speed, so you're comfortable learning Linux.
And to plug one course real quick, I'm currently in Shawn's Linux for the Real World. So then that's another nice step that you could go with his Linux curriculum.
Awesome.
Once you have the foundation.
Awesome. So would it be okay to tell sysadmins who are asking, hey, how much Linux do I really need to know? Because at this point, Linux is underlying almost everything that we're doing. We're seeing it in Cisco. Even Microsoft is introducing Linux. So Linux is all over the place. It's kind of running, I don't know how to describe it, but would it be the real world course? Something to get in there, get our hands dirty, just get a basic understanding?
If you really want to learn Linux, I really recommend the LPIC 1 course first. I mean, Linux in the real world is really good for a sysadmin, who's in the real world trying to make stuff happen. But that LPIC 1 is a great foundation so you know what you're doing. And as far as Linux being everywhere, really quick story. I was sitting next to a guy in the airplane on the way here, and he asked what I did, and he talked about CBT Nuggets, and I said, Linux is what most of my training's been on. And he said, oh, I've heard of that, but I don't have it anywhere. Where is it? What might it be in? And I said, well, you can run it as a desktop on a laptop. He's like, oh, yeah, I don't even use a laptop. I use a Chromebook now. It was almost like, spoon-fed me the line.
Yeah.
Well, Chromebooks run Linux. And he's like, really? That's crazy. And then he got out his phone, and I said, hey, look, an Android phone. That's running Linux. It is a
Mind blow.
It's just important to know. I mean, truly, the more you know, the better decisions you can make. So.
It's getting to the point now
Little
where
star going across, the more you know.
Sysadmins have got to know at least one other language and Linux on top of that. What are some other programming languages that you guys would recommend? Let's go with Garth.
Scripting language, PowerShell, absolutely. But programming language, I mean, if you really want to learn, I'd say Python.
Python.
Absolutely.
Okay. Another question, it popped up in the community. A few people were trying to take some GCP exams, and apparently they've changed. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. They rolled out new role-based courses.
Okay.
So while our legacy courses or exams will still work, they all map accordingly to the new role-based courses. So,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Sorry about that.
It's all in the community checks line. You laid it out, I believe, on post.
Okay.
Yeah, so they previously.
Jack, I've been so helpful, I can't remember who I've helped.
This has been the craziest few days. I woke up this morning, I was like, what is my name? And you were...
I was just going to say, previously the courses mapped to specific products. So there was an app engine course, there was a cloud SQL course. Now they map to job functions or job roles. That's when he says role-based. So now there's exams for professional developer, a solutions architect,
sysops,
a systems operator,
data scientist.
Yep. So they're more focused on
Jeremy's got a
Jeremy's sticking with it.
requirement.
Yeah, does AWS have anything like that?
AWS, yeah,
Some
AWS
certification. Yes,
certification
they do.
for a while have been role focused. I'm not sure exactly what their certifications are. Do you know they have a systems architect?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've got free.
Solutions architect.
Solutions
I think that's
architect,
where
yeah.
solutions
Yeah, that's the exact
administrator
wrong
first,
time.
and then architect after that.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
How
Last
are you,
couple
Anthony?
minutes. Last couple minutes. Anything else you guys want to throw out there?
So Python was the recommendation for
Yeah,
language.
yeah,
And that's
great.
kind of like the de facto standard answer I always get from developers. My question is, learning Python, is it just because it's Python specifically, or is it because it prepares you to think programmatically?
Yeah, it's
I mean,
easy to learn. It's accessible. You don't need to learn any complex tools. You can fire up Notepad.
And then
Or
once
whatever
once
text
you're
editor you want.
comfortable using Python to solve the problems that you need to program.
Yeah, it's a great way to get you thinking in code.
And does it make other languages easier to pick up?
Absolutely.
I guess that's the question. Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Python is overtaking Java as the #1 learning language
Extremely
in university
Okay.
for exactly that reason, because it's just so much easier to get into than Java.
I picked up the For Dummies text because of its utilization in the Cisco application-centric interface area. So it's
Yeah,
the scripting language of choice there.
And it's everywhere.
which it was. This surprised me as someone recently asked me about Python for network engineers. What do you mean?
How could this work?
They're like, no, we're scripting these devices with Python now. So
Awesome. Anything else? No? All right. I want to thank everyone in the community for joining us for this this DevOps Super Hangout. The recording will be available later today, and we'll see you all in the community.
bye,
Thanks for letting me
Watch
crash
my
the
doctor.
Smart
Thanks,
Kids
Anthony.
party.
Yeah.